Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by thanking the Supplier Development Programme, Scottish Government and Scotland Excel for the kind invite to come along today to talk a little bit about Scotland supported businesses, sustainable procurement duties and community wealth building. My name is Alistair Kerr and I'm Director and Chair of the British Association for Supported Employment in Scotland. Let me start off by telling you a little bit about the BASE network in Scotland. BASE is a national trade association for the supported employment sector across the UK. BASE was formed back in 2006 when it was a merger of two organisations, one called AFSE, the second one called NACE, and they had been delivering services for a good decade before that. And the purpose of BASE is to promote all things to do with supported employment and to be a voice to government for disabled services. In 2006, when AFSE and NACE merged, when they came together, they formed BASE, and that then became a UK trade body. And I was elected to chair of BASE in Scotland in 2006, and we have annual election events every 2 years. I also represent Scotland on BASE's National Executive Committee, where BASE members from across the UK and wider come together every quarter to discuss and plan how the strategy can be rolled out to promote supported employment across the UK and indeed in Europe. Back in 2012, BASE supported the First Minister and central government procurement to try and look at how we could better achieve outcomes for disabled people, especially around about supported employment. And there was kind of two strands to that approach. We launched the Supported Business Advisory Group, which was chaired by Minister Ewing and subsequently chaired by Minister Halehouse and just pre the election there, Minister Hepburn. And the purpose of that group was to bring together quarterly key stakeholders from the world of public procurement, key stakeholders within the supported employment world in Scotland, and key supported businesses. And the kind of key laser focus was about engagement and spend with supported business under the various duties at that time, all targeted at creating employment opportunities for disabled people. A few years later, in kind of 2016, post the devolved powers in 2015, Scottish Government had the challenge when the EU definition changed for supported businesses. Initially, it was 50% of the workforce were disabled, and that changed into, it transitioned into 30% of your workforce being disadvantaged. So it's been a real challenge in how you define disadvantage, because that's extremely challenging. Both UK government and EU directorates really challenged with that definition of disadvantage. But Scottish Government policymakers had a serious attempt at trying to define that two-part sustainability test, and they supported them with that. I'm reliably informed that it's under review, and I think there's going to be a relook and refresh of that two-part test to try and make it easier for suppliers and commissioners to make sure that they effectively utilise the policies that this underpins. I mentioned earlier that we had worked with central government procurement in producing supported business frameworks. There's other directorates that we've worked with in the last few years, and two of them in the last 12 months and 6 months respectively, with NHS National Procurement and Scotland Excel, both of whom have been long-term supporters of the BASE network and indeed supported businesses, and really have a drive and an ambition to create employment opportunities for disabled or disadvantaged people. And one of the other things that I'm going to tell you about, one of the other strategies as we go through the presentation, we have been supporting the new Scottish Government's Social Security Directorate with the development of the first corporate procurement plan. So to that end, we have been working with the key commissioner there to look at how we can embed supported businesses in that strategy going forward. So to keep things simple, what is a supported business? Supported businesses are enterprises whose main social aim is to integrate disabled or disadvantaged people socially and professionally. The workforce must be at least 30% disabled or disadvantaged. And that has been, I think, through unintended consequences with policies, and that probably needs to be defined a bit more on the public arena. And that's the definition that is an industry definition of a supported business. So over the last 10 years, but let's talk about probably the last 3 years, BASE has supported commissioners and suppliers with embedding supported businesses pre and post ITT stage. The preference is for pre-ITT stage because it obviously makes things easier to manage, easier to understand. It's not subjective because it's obviously written into the ITT stage, and suppliers then have to work towards achieving that. And we've got a number of really, really good news stories from that type of approach. But when we're trying to scale up and try to think of a national Scottish offer, then the earlier you can get organisations with BASE embedded in either by commissioners or suppliers, then the chance of really having the disability employment gap and the ambition of no one being left behind can be realised. BASE's offer support to the audience today and wider as we can support suppliers with embedding supported businesses in procurement timetables and supply chains going forward. One of the challenges that we've all faced is when the definition changed from 50% disabled to 30% disadvantaged, it really caused market confusion, market dilution, and behaviours that probably were the polar opposite of what the policy is set up to achieve, i.e. create employment opportunities for disabled people. So BASE has developed a service that's been running for about a year, where we work along key stakeholders, bringing the supported business network to the planning stages, be it commissioners or suppliers. Each supported business will have due diligence carried out from company's house all the way forward to their operational delivery, their goods, their services, so that you can be sure with 100% certainty that the organisations that BASE brings to your table are fit for purpose and meet the required definitions and surpass them. If we move on, there's too many to list there, but that gives you a good example of the goods and services provided to the public sector by Scotland's supported businesses underpinned by the BASE network. And as you can see there, they're quite a broad range of services. The markets change weekly, the dynamics of purchasing changes weekly as well with offers, and depending on the specifications and the requirements, the supported businesses are pretty effective at aligning your offer to theirs. So at the end of the day, that gives you a good feeling, a good understanding of the goods and services that are provided. That list is not exhaustive, it's far broader, but that gives you a good feeling. At the bottom of the slide there, you can see the BASE also offers supported employment qualifications, and I'll come back to that. We also training, education, skill services and advice services. And those advice services are kind of two-pronged. They're targeted at obviously people with disabilities and how they are going to move forward in their own individual journeys. One of the big areas that we work on is that transition from education to employment, which, as you know, can be very complex and challenging for people with disabilities. And BASE provides those types of wraparound support services. The other one is the supported employment qualification. As many of you will know in the audience, Scottish Government are currently reviewing the supported employment offer in Scotland, the national offer, and they've carried out reviews of the current Fair Start Scotland providers. They're currently now looking at the third sector and local authorities and looking at their delivery model of supported employment. So BASE stand ready there to support Scottish Government if they choose to look at a national supported employment offer. The purpose of the supported employment review group is to look at all these areas And my understanding is that this will be the foundation to develop the commissioning of Fair Start Scotland 2. And hopefully there'll be a strong evidence-based supported employment element attached to that to build on what already exists. So let me tell you about some good news stories. As we all know, we've been challenged like never before over the last 12, 15 months. And we know that the next 12 and 15 months will be truly challenging in terms of social and economic impact and how that will affect disabled or disadvantaged people going forward. So in December 2019, which seems like a lifetime ago now, just as COVID was starting to strike the world, we were asked to go to a meeting with the head of procurement from Scottish Prison Service, a person called Andrew Doerr. And we've had a long-established relationship with that director over the years, and we've developed many sustainable opportunities and positive activities. And we met the executive team from Morrison's Construction, who were there to, I believe, sign on the dotted line for a new contract to deliver the new rebuild of the women's facility at Corton Vale. And the idea of the meeting was to see how we could embed the supported business offer within the awarded contract. And subsequently then, we met numerous times by Zoom, as obviously the world was changing, and Morrison Construction launched a group called the Supported Procurement Group. And the idea there, the ambition there, was to have a supply chain that was purely made up of supported businesses, onboarded into Morrison's Construction bid pipeline. And over the weeks and months, we started working through the strategic objectives and looking at what possible outputs, looking at the goods and services and how we could really build and bring that together. And that group is led by a person called Jim Johnson, who has been really proactive in driving this agenda. So we brought a group of supported businesses together with Jim and the commissioning team, and we started looking at how we could then take that model once these supported businesses were onboarded into the procurement directorate when they're commissioning for public service contracts, but how indeed we could then take it and replicate it in the bidding strategy. So following on from Corton Vale, which is now up and running and awards are already being made, we then worked in partnership with Morrison Construction and Procurement, and we looked at the NHS National Procurement Loading Tier Framework. And BASE and Morrison Construction were successful in that tender, and we're looking forward now to the outputs from that outcome contract award. So there's two evidence-based examples since really the turn of the year where we've started to be proactive at a time where the world has been holding its breath for very obvious reasons. One of the unintended consequences, which were not really cited on as we started the initial planning, was looking at the 450 supply chain partners that Morrison Construction Company have. So one of the benefits from creating that original model was to give exposure then to this large Tier 1 supply chain. Now, it's early days in that, but we know that the drive and the commitment from an evidence-based perspective has been there from Morrison Construction, and we're looking forward to how we can then interface with the supply chain effectively and build the supported businesses into their supply chains and then start to really develop out the offers. So they're two good evidence-based examples of how the sustainable procurement duty is currently working. I think one of the challenges we had was the onboarding process to Morrison Construction, because as you know, these types of activities are an absolute necessity, and we have to make sure that legally everybody is onboarded effectively to make sure that going forward everybody understands everybody's requirements. And that took a bit of time just to work through and understand. Through the support from Morrison's Construction team, then we've managed to get the organisations onboarded. And if anybody wants to find out more about that, then my contact details will be at the end of this presentation. So the other exciting development, BASE has a long-established relationship, a positive relationship with central government procurement, and one of the people that we met there, over a kind of 10-year period was a person called Natalie McKindle, and Natalie had recently been appointed to the head of procurement for Social Security Scotland. And this directorate is extremely important for disabled people, as it's obviously the kind of one of the tranches of the Devolved Powers Post Smith Commission. And just before Christmas 2020, Natalie had sent us an email asking if we'd be interested in being involved, as a commissioning team had looked at the new corporate procurement strategy for Social Security Scotland, and of course we'd be delighted to have been involved in it and invited. So the kind of heading for the approach, if we just read it, would be BASE is a key stakeholder to facilitate an understanding of the supported business landscape, especially in Dundee and surrounding area. The agency has a Dundee First policy and aims to maximise the spend with supported businesses, as this has a strong alignment with the PFG commitments. So it is a local context with a national reach. So over the weeks and months, we worked with the commissioning team and we looked at how we could embed BASE and the supported businesses in the corporate procurement strategy, which would clearly set the foundation for those commissioners as they tender for goods and services going forward to naturally embed the supported businesses in each of the procurement activities. And I'm happy to report that although that is early days, it's generated a few £100,000 of business for supported businesses both in Dundee and in Glasgow, where the two head offices are. So a fantastic proactive approach, setting a foundation to really enact these policies. On a broader scale than that, on the second point there, BASE is a key stakeholder to facilitate an understanding of the supported business landscape across Scotland, and we have similar relationships with Scotland Excel, Central Government Procurement, NHS National and Local Procurement, Transport Scotland, Scottish Prison Service, who I alluded to earlier, and APUC, Advanced Procurement for Universities and Colleges, and of course that has a national and a local reach. And we've been involved in pre-IT stages, we've looked at policies, we've looked at pre-ITT development around offers, and also post-ITT awards, and the development of frameworks, and obviously covered them earlier. But it's very clear from the learning we have, and it sounds a bit common sense sitting here now, but the earlier you get it embedded, the commissioners get it embedded, then the suppliers will obviously endeavour to work to meet those expectations when they're bidding. It's also crucial, if you think about it, more and more directorates are putting a percentage weighting onto the sustainable procurement duty. And as you know, each of the heads of these directorates have to report annually on the engagement and spend under these duties with supported businesses in the wider third sector. So these are all fantastic foundations being laid at the moment, at the time when we're going to be probably tested like never before going forward. One of the learnings from working with Morrison Construction, it's been a relatively new experience for BASE and some of the network, and private sector construction, looking at big infrastructure contracts, for example. The scale and the size was quite daunting in some cases, but Morrison Construction have not been precious about supporting us, and they've really helped on a journey, if you like, of learning about onboarding and how the networks work and how the whole sector works as a whole. So that's been invaluable, which will then set the foundation for other construction companies or infrastructure organisations who are looking to develop similar type models, which can only benefit disabled people as we go forward. So I think on reflection, I think the last year that we've had has tested everyone. I think it's been that word that was used initially, unprecedented, which had been used many, many, many times, has turned out to be extremely accurate. I think also through the engagement with the BASE network across Scotland and the UK over the weeks and months, because as you know, everybody uses Zoom and Teams and all that type of thing, and although that social interaction has been lost, it's really kept you up to speed with how the world is turning. And some, to be honest with you, is pretty worrying. There's been some fantastic good news stories with people who are going over and above and beyond the call of duty just to do kind things, which can only be a good thing. And as the furlough scheme comes to an end, obviously at the moment penciled in for October, that is when the true social and economic impact will start to develop. And what will that mean for disabled and disadvantaged people? Well, it'll mean that duties like sustainable procurement duty, it'll mean things like supported business frameworks will play a vital part in Scottish Government going forward. We had a really, really positive meeting with a relatively new Director of Procurement for Scottish Government, Nick Ford, who is really proactive in this area, really is working hard to understand it and really working hard to see how we can realign, refresh and set a foundation if the ambition is to utilise the Scottish Government's sustainable procurement duty, halving the disability employment gap and ensuring no one is. Then that type of drive, from the top and from the front will go a long way for commissioners and suppliers to really grasp the bull by the horns and really try and make a difference at the time of greatest need. And at the time of the real social and economic impact is probably in front rather than behind us. So to finish up, I've got a couple of lines there. We can provide hope, not false expectation, for people across Scotland who want to work and contribute, but due to health, clinical or personal circumstances, require a supportive employer to understand each person's unique health condition and circumstances. By doing your day job, you can be part of this timely journey and change a disabled person's life for the better at a time of greatest need. Thank you. You can see from the last slide my contact details there. So if you want to drop me an email or give me a call, then I'm always available to see how we can develop some opportunities going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. I think I found today's sessions to go both informative and interesting, learned a few things. So we're on to the Q&A part, and if you'd like to submit your questions, I will endeavour to answer them, or I can follow up with you after the event. So I see there we have a couple of questions. How can my small business set up as a limited company supported business? As you see at the end of the presentation, my contact details are there, and you can email me or call me, and we can talk through where you are on your individual journey and how BASE can support you going forward to endeavour to meet your requirements. What else? What is your email address? I don't catch it. My email address is obviously at the end of the presentation there, and I know my colleagues at Supplier Development Programme would be able to facilitate sending those details to you, and hopefully I can help you going forward. I think that everything else, listening to the discussions today, I think there's a refreshed approach and a fresh journey coming in terms of that whole social and economic recovery, which is obviously in everybody's minds, and hopefully this will be the kind of turning point for everybody, where an all-inclusive Scotland and disabled and disadvantaged people come along and be part of just mainstream Scotland, if you like. I see another question there. BASE is certainly in a position to support organisations, whether it's commissioners or suppliers, with embedding the supported business community within the offers, and of course in turn doing that it produces opportunities for disabled and disadvantaged people who are, have an ambition to work or achieve individual goals and ambitions, and the sustainable procurement duty enables that to happen. And as I said in the presentation, like never before, these types of duties will be increasingly used, increasingly valuable. Speak to the procurement directorates almost on a daily and weekly basis, and there is a big ambition to realign the approaches, because I think the one thing that COVID has taught us all is that over the last 12, 15 months, the inequalities across the UK and beyond have been polarised probably like never before. And if one of the outputs is the last 12 months of COVID is a level playing field for all, then some good can come out of the most historic traumatic event in 100 years. I see another question there. There is the base network across Scotland has been growing steadily. In the last 12 months, it's grown by about 10% across the UK, and I think it's very clear there's a real appetite to mainstream a supportive approach to people who really do have an ambition to achieve their goals, set their goals, and have that support, wraparound support that I mentioned earlier, to achieve those goals. The political will is there, the policy intents are there, the duties are there, and it's incumbent on us all to make those happen. So I think the time for the talking and prevaricating that we've heard over many years with many times good intentions, we're in the position now that we really have to make a change in order that we can readdress the balance effectively for disabled people. And listening to a lot of the conversations today and some of the rooms that we've been in, there's a real appetite within the world of public procurement to really be the enabler for this to happen. We appreciate, like everything else, it's always about resources and time constraints, and there's never enough time, there's never enough resources. But we're talking about human beings here who have 100% every right to benefit from government policies and government strategies. I think in the coming weeks, months and years, and we're obviously clearly not out of the firing line of the pandemic at the moment, and I think with electronic platforms it's enabled public, private and third sector to continue to build and develop on what was already in place. And we're also aware that there was a big pause in procurement timetables for very obvious reasons, but it's also very obvious as well that those public procurement timetables are starting to come back on stream, which certainly in the short and medium time will be very welcome as we enter the challenging period when furlough comes to an end, and how that impacts on your business, supported businesses, social firms, social enterprises, social businesses, how it impacts on them will be crucial going forward. If we don't enable these duties to benefit the type of people that were set up to support, then we will be, if the ambition is to halve the disability employment gap, well, that gap can only get larger, and the social and economic imbalances will only continue to grow. So it's a phrase that's gone, cometh the hour, cometh the man in time of trouble, and we are in the position now that we really need to drive these agendas forward. Just looking at other questions. Yep, I see some comments there from our colleagues in the world of public procurement that are very positive. So there's a real striking ambition there, a realignment, a refresh, a real drive to achieve significant opportunities, sustainable opportunities for disabled people. And you've heard about the good news stories there, and we've got many others that are currently developing. So let's hope that all concerned can be involved and participate. We all know somebody that's been impacted, and as you know, mental health going forward. There was already a huge challenge in Scotland, and we know from daily engagement that it's only increasing. So on behalf of BASE, can I thank you for taking the time to listen today, and I wish you well going forward.